All righty.
And I'll start the webinar.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the May 11th meeting of the Regional Housing Council. Let's do quick check-ins. Can we start with Carolina Mejia?
Carolina Mejia, Thurston County, and with me today I have Tom Webster.
All righty. Welcome back, Tom Webster. All righty. And do you have any staff here, Tom?
Not right now. I think Jacinda may be joining us, but
okay.
And Keely's in Chicago for a Built for Zero conference.
That's right. Okay, great. All righty. Why don't we move on to Tumwater?
Hi, Michael Altauser, Tumwater City Council, joined by Councilmember Joan Cathy, as well as Brad Medjord from our planning department. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Olympia?
Hi there, Jim Cooper, council member. We have Councilmember Danny Madrone and Darian Lightfoot, our home fund and other housing projects manager. Other duties as assigned.
Alrighty. And from Lacey, I'm Carolyn Cox, and we have the inestimable Rick Walk and Kelly Adams. So welcome to everybody. My agenda just decided to go away. So everybody have a chance to review the agenda and have any, we're going to welcome Jacinda here. Hi, Jacinda. Anybody have any changes or deletions to the agenda? Everybody happy with that? So can I have a quick motion to approve it?
So moved.
Oh, second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Off we go. Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the April 27th meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor of approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So now we're going to turn it over to Tom to walk us through the RFP recommendations.
All right, thank you, Chair Cox. So just to refresh everyone, although I'm sure your memories are strong. So this is our RFP process. We're getting towards the end of our RFP process for this year. So back in February, we issued an RFP, and we have in essence, three buckets of money that we have to award. One is our capital dollars. So this is a combination of federal dollars under the Federal Home Investment Partnership Program, along with our local 2060 document recording fee we issue for capital projects. We also had a set aside of $400,000 for cold and hazardous weather activities, and that comes out of our 2163 local document recording fee. And then we received just over $300,000 unexpectedly from the State Department of Commerce under the Consolidated Homeless Grant Program. And so we awarded that, or we are issuing that RFP as well. So we have those three buckets that we're awarding. So last meeting, you approved the renewal of all the previous 2 years, the second year of all those contracts that we awarded last year. So this is a smaller RFP round this year. So RFP went out in February. Applications were due April 1st. Those applications were reviewed by the technical review team. As part of the technical review team for the capital projects, we invited 2 members of the affordable housing team to participate in that process. So Trish Gregory from Family Sports Center and Jimmy Matson joined the technical team to review the capital applications and participate in that process. So the technical review team scored the applications and made recommendations to the RHC funding work group. The RHC funding work group met on Monday of this week and reviewed those recommendations and are bringing forth those recommendations to you for your consideration this evening. Next steps following your recommendations tonight is we will take these to the Board of County Commissioners for their final approval. Appreciate your timing. We know you had a retreat on Friday and another meeting this Friday. And for those on the funding work group, you also had a meeting on Monday. So it's we know it's been a heavy RHC week, so appreciate your efforts. The timing on this is important, especially for the federal funds. We do have to submit our annual action plan to HUD by July 15th. That requires a 30-day public comment period. So we really need to have that out to the public by the end of May, early June. And we need time to actually write that plan to get it out there. So having these decisions will allow us to draft that plan in time to meet those HUD deadlines. These contracts, the CHG contracts will begin July 1st. Our federal contracts, the home capital projects, those projects won't start until after we receive a grant agreement from HUD, which usually happens end of September, maybe early October. And then depending on when those projects are ready to go, the cold and hazardous weather contracts are ready for award. That the 2163 funding starts on September 1st, is the contract year for those funds. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So any questions before we get into the actual recommendations, kind of on where we are in the process. So I'm gonna
Anybody? Okay.
share. So can you, oops. All right. Can you see my screen with the capital funding award recommendations?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. So I'm going to start with the capital awards. So we have not received our official award amounts from HUD for our home projects. We're working with an estimate right now, and we're estimating between the home, the federal home award, and our $2060 that we have approximately $1.2 million to award. We're cautiously optimistic that that amount will be a little higher than that, but probably not substantially higher. So we received 5 applications this year. You can see the list of from 4 agencies. So you can see the list there from South Puget Sound Habitat for Humanity, Low Income Housing Institute, Thurston Housing Land Trust, Homes First, and a second application from the Thurston Housing Land Trust. You can see the funding request as well as the recommendation from funding work group. So the group, the funding work group is recommending to award funds to 3 projects. The first to the Habitat for Humanity for their Tumwater Townhomes project. They requested $540,000, and the recommendation is to fully fund that request for $540,000. Next is the Lehigh Martin Way Phase 2 project. This project has received funding from this group previously, as has the Tumwater Townhomes, with a request of $1.65 million. The recommendation is to fund that project for $460,000, with any additional funds above the $1.2 million that we receive to go to this award. So that may increase slightly. And then the third recommendation is for the Thurston Housing Land Trust 8-plex acquisition, a recommendation to fully fund their request for $200,000. So, and I might ask Jacinda to weigh in as kind of the leader of the review team for these capital projects. So I want to kind of talk about these a little bit more and explain the thinking. Especially, I'll start with the Thurston Housing Land Trust. So this is a newer agency. They did come in last year with a request for funding that was not accepted. And we went back and provided them some guidance, including asking them to partner with some other agencies, look for opportunities to be mentored by other agencies, look for a little bit more leverage to build their capacity. And so the review team really saw an effort by the land trust to kind of take that feedback to heart and came back with a much stronger proposal this year with kind of concerted effort to meet those objections, to meet those kind of recommendations. And so the group really wanted to encourage, especially our smaller, newer organizations, with what was a strong project, with a new type of housing in our community as a cooperative, or a newer, a more diverse type of housing. So there's real interest in supporting the land trust to encourage new organizations, and not to, tell people, give them feedback, see them meet that feedback, and then continue to deny their application. So there was a sense of really wanting to support the land trust with a strong application that really made a concerted effort to take the feedback we provided last year. And the 200,000 seemed like a modest request to help get that organization kind of supported in this project.
Tom, can I ask a quick question about that?
Sure.
And it'll be my thread sort of throughout, so this way you can think about whether you know. I'm just curious how much of that Aplex 200 fills, and whether they have, what their gap is, and how much of it's filled beyond this recommendation.
Yeah, and I'm going to turn to Jacinda to answer that a little bit. They have had conversations with the Housing Finance Commission. So they did kind of incorporate that into their kind of application. So there is a gap. Jacinda, do you have more details on kind of that funding gap and their plan for addressing that?
Yes. So our amount would act as leverage if it was awarded. And the project total project budget is about 1.7 million. They do have a letter of intent to purchase already. And as Tom said, they have spoken with both the Washington State Housing Finance Commission and the Housing Trust Fund, and have had conversations with both of those entities, and feel like they are positioned well with our leverage to attract those funds. So the large portion of those funds, of the remaining, the gap, so to say, would come from local funding sources, or excuse me, from state funding sources.
Great. All right, so that is, any other questions on the Housing Trust Fund, or the Housing Land Trust, excuse me.
Could I ask Tom about the thinking on Homes First?
Yeah, so Homes First was a strong application. The thinking was, and I'll ask Jacinda to weigh in as well, or other folks from the housing, from the tech team, is one, compared to the land trust project that had a specific project identified, where the Homes First didn't have a specific project identified. Their model is they will go out and purchase a home, but it wasn't a specific project. So kind of in comparing those, having a more specific project in the land trust was seen as was a more concrete project, something a little more, I don't know, something to kind of hold on to. So that was kind of seen in their favor. Also, Homes First currently has funding available that they've been awarded in the past that they've not yet expended. So there's a sense that there is kind of, we're waiting for Homes First to kind of, and they're hoping to do so this summer. They have some projects in place, but there has been, it's taken with the housing markets, it's taken Homes First a little bit longer to find homes to purchase, and they do have both CDBG and home funds available to them. So those it's obviously Homes First is a strong organization with a strong history. But those were some of the reasons why there was not a recommendation to fund them this year. And Jacinda, anything you would add to that?
I just want to echo what Tom said, that there are still CDBG specific also to Tumwater, and sorry, the Tumwater's Council's decision last year with CDBG and home funds. And that Trudy and I have been in close communication, and they feel like they're close with a lot of their projects, but the market has been tough for them.
Okay, thank you very much. I know I'm going to get asked about it. So.
Yep. All right, so, and Jacinda, I may have you talk about the habitat, the project a little bit. This is a phased project, so it has received support in the past. It's a townhome project, so I believe 12 units and 12 buildings, 24 units. Is that right? Or 20 or 14 and 28?
Yep.
14 and 28. So anyway, can you talk a little bit more about
Yes.
the Habitat
Yeah.
project?
And so this is a project that has been supported in the past. And I will tell you a little bit about this project and then just make some comments relative to both this project and Lehigh's phase 2 project. So the funding request represents a gap in funding that has recently materialized. The project does consist of 2 phases, 14 total townhomes, 28 total units in Tumwater. The project is at a point, I actually just finished the NEPA and got HUD's approval. So they're literally like, they're ready to break ground, with the exception that, again, this gap is materializing. So some of the thought there was similar to Homes First, they have a proven track record and capacity. It's very much ready to go, which is important with our HUD home funds. And relative to that gap, which also applies to the Martin Way project, and just anecdotally also applies to the Family Support Center project that is not part of these recommendations, but is a project that is trying to close right now and running into the same problems. These gaps keep popping up and are very much related to COVID and everything that it has caused in terms of the labor force. There's a shortage in labor. Concrete strike has negatively impacted the pricing. Building costs have gone up. Early in COVID, we had some issues with lenders being a little more risk adverse. With Habitat, that's not the case here. But these gaps with both of these projects very much reflect those realities. And again, it is something that we're also seeing with other active projects and have been advised from the Housing Trust Fund to be prepared to continue to see for potentially the next 2 years. So with both Habitat and Lehigh, this is the second phase. Phase 2, this is also a project that this group committed up to 1.7 million in 1406 funds. So this 1.6 million request is a gap above and beyond the 1406 as well, related again to the same issues that I have just described. And both of these are ones that we have, this group and regionally have committed to, are working hard and ready to go. And the scoring team, as well as the funders work group, felt it was important to support those projects that have already started in both a home ownership option and a rental option to get them, as we typically say, across the line and materialized.
Great.
Thanks, Jacinda. Any questions on those?
I was just going to ask Carolyn, do you want to do them as we go for motions or wait until he's done?
Maybe it'd be easier to do motions and do them individually because it's hard to remember all that detail toward the end. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Tom, is that okay with you?
Yeah, that works. That would, yeah,
Okay.
that's great.
I'm not hearing any reactions here. So, alrighty. So why don't we take a motion on the 2022 Capital Funding Award recommendations?
I'll move approval as Are you asking a question, Michael? Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Okay. I move approval as recommended by the funding group.
I'll second the motion.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the recommendations as recommended, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Tom. Let's move on
Great.
to the next one.
All right, great, thank you. Those were in some ways maybe the easy ones. These were a little more complicated, so I'm going to try to explain this and hopefully it makes sense, but understand that you may have some questions. So as I said at the beginning, this group set aside $400,000 for cold and hazardous weather contracts. And then we received around $306,000 under CHG. We did not receive $400,000 of requests for cold and hazardous weather funding. However, we received close to 1.4 million in requests for that CHG funding. And kind of looking at that and trying to maximize the use of funds, the work group, the tech team, and then the funding work group is bringing to you kind of a recommendation that may be a little bit kind of confusing at first. So first, I want to talk about the cold and hazardous weather kind of contracts. And you see this at the beginning here. So we received applications from Interfaith Works for hazardous weather. So this is what they have done in the past of staffing for hazardous weather events. So day shelters, overnight shelters. And then the other one at the bottom, Partners in Prevention Education, hazardous weather, also shelter in place activities. So those are two hazardous weather contracts that we have awarded in past years. And those reflect kind of similarly what has been done in the past. So you can see the 21 funding amounts. Interfaith had 25,000, Partners in Prevention Education had 15,000. This year, the request was slightly higher at 30,000 and 18,000 respectively. So those were the hazardous weather applications we received. We received 3 applications for cold weather shelter, Family Support Center of South Sound, PIPE, and CYS. These are also applications we received in past years. Family Support Center has been doing both. They've shifted to from a volunteer model to staffing due to COVID. They've also increased the number of hotel rooms, but otherwise they're putting folks on their floor in Pear Blossom and also kind of some hoteling. So that really accounts for the increased cost. Is they've really moved from a primary volunteer based to kind of a paid staff based, and that was really due to COVID. Partners in Prevention Education is a cold weather shelter in place, so providing survival gear throughout the cold weather season, as they have done in past years. And then CYS with their cold weather shelter. And you'll see we're recommending a kind of award of 0 amount for that, and I'll explain that kind of in just a minute for why we're doing that. We were hoping to receive another application from Interfaith Works for cold weather shelter for single adults. That is something we've been missing in our system for the last several winters, is a single adult cold weather shelter. We did not receive an application from Interfaith Works for that. We were hoping with Unity Commons that they would do that. And speaking with Meg Keeley, reached out to Meg, and really was just a staffing capacity, feeling that they don't have the staff capacity right now to kind of expand during the cold weather season. So that was the reason we did not receive an application from Interfaith Works. So dealing with the application we received, we're recommending, with the exception of CYS, which I'll kind of get to here, full funding for all of those requests for cold and hazardous weather, which brings us to kind of amount of $274,715. As you can see, as I mentioned, we received 1.4 million in requests under those CHG kind of contracts. And these are really, for the most part, for many of these are supplemental funds above and beyond the awards that you just approved for renewal for a second year. So many of these projects received a base award that was renewed last year, and this would be additional funding to supplement those programs with some exceptions. So CYS, one of the applications we received from CYS was under that CHG bucket, was to support their young adult shelter on a year-round basis to supplement their funding. So what the tech team and the funding work group is recommending is, rather than providing funding to their cold weather shelter, is to fully fund the request for their year-round young adult shelter. That gives them the flexibility to use those funds on a year round, which will also be used during the cold weather season to supplement their staff. So rather than limiting them to just the cold weather season, we're basically recommending that we use those same kind of a portion of that $400,000 set aside for cold and hazardous weather to fund the CYS shelter, but to fund this proposal that is really kind of supporting them year round rather than just during the cold weather season. We have noticed during the past 2 years during COVID, they have not increased their bed capacity, or they've not seen increased demand for their beds during the cold weather season. They are still at kind of below 18 beds, which is their kind of year-round capacity for beds. So, you know, we're hopeful as COVID wanes a little bit, hopefully, and that there will be an increase in their shelter going forward. So that's the reason why we did not, we're not recommending funding their cold weather shelter, but we are recommending a full funding of that 82.5 for the same shelter activities, but to do so on a year-round basis. That left us with a little bit of money on that. That's $400,000. So we're recommending funding for Drexel House shelter as well. That would also be a year-round, not a cold weather specific shelter, but to support the Drexel House shelter above and beyond the funding that they received, that they regularly receive. So that total, the cold and hazardous weather shelters for $274,715, plus those 2 supplemental awards that are technically not specific to cold and hazardous weather, but are sheltering activities for an additional $125,285, brings you to the total of $400,000 of the $2,163 that was dedicated for cold and hazardous weather. Let me stop there to see if that makes sense. If you have questions about that, and then I can talk about, then I'll talk about kind of the recommendations around the consolidated homeless grant funding.
Anybody have a question? If so, Michael.
Yeah, so just to make sure I'm understanding the CYS thing. So they submitted 2 requests, one for 62 and one for 82.5. And the 62, like let's say we funded the 82.5, so let's say that that's a given. And so the 62 was prospectively funding that would have allowed that organization to essentially beef up its cold weather services during that time of the year. But it sounds like there hasn't been the demand to where that is necessary or needed. So by funding the 82.5, we don't need to beef those up in the cold weather times. Is that inaccurate?
That's an accurate summary. Yes, yes. Okay. And this 82 will allow them to kind of expand capacity. So yes, so your description was accurate and perhaps clearer than I was able to explain.
Okay. Well, I think you explained it clearly. I'm just trying to, sorry, I'm still waking up. I'm just a little slow on it, on the uptake. So
no, it's confusing. I will say I reached out to Derek Harris to kind of present this to him and see if that would cause any concerns from his perspective. He was comfortable with that approach. He thought it makes sense. So from CYS's perspective, I let him know this was something we were going to recommend, and Derek was okay with that approach. And he appreciated the extra flexibility by funding the year-round contract rather than just limiting it to the cold weather.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions on that section? So Tom, you want to walk us through?
Yeah, let me walk you through
the CHG there, and then we'll take both of those in one block and a vote. Okay.
So for the CHG application, so the Catholic Community Services was originally kind of applied under this block. We received about 8 applications there. As you can see, many of those received funding in the previous year. And so this is really additional funding beyond kind of these amounts. So the Family Support Center, CHG Targeted Prevention, as I mentioned, they've really gone to kind of a full staffing. So this would be, this is a prevention kind of program. I'm sorry, Keely took the lead on reviewing these applications, and she's not here. So I should have been a little more prepared to talk about kind of that project. I don't know if there's someone on the call who reviewed these applications who can help me on this. The one I was trying to talk about, the support staff, that is for additional staff for their shelter. So they're looking to add staff to their shelter to be able to sufficiently cover, because they're moving from volunteers to paid staff. They need additional paid staff. So that's additional staff capacity that they're asking for. The Safe Place, again, for their operations and maintenance, and then for supportive housing. So that's supporting people, kind of rent assistance type activities. Those are current programs providing additional funding to grow their capacity in those areas. And then Coyote Village, again, looking to grow their capacity for their Coyote Village program. Interfaith Works, their staff support wage adjustment was to increase the wages for existing staff. So it wasn't kind of additional staff, but it was to provide increased wages for their staff, which is certainly well deserved, to make sure that they can kind of keep and retain their staff. We are not recommending funding for that, partially because the group felt that, that was a pretty large request, and that, providing them with a smaller amount, $15,000, $20,000 wasn't going to kind of really allow them to really increase staff wages kind of substantially in a meaningful way. So that felt like a hard request to only partially fund at a very low level. And it was a pretty substantial ask, kind of as a portion of the $300,000. So, and then again, Olympia Mutual Aid Partners to continue to expand their scattered site program at the ask of $441,000. That was a large ask. That was really tough to kind of feel like a small portion of that would be meaningful. It also came as a lower scoring. And then Build a Bus. So Olympia Mutual Aid Partners, Build a Bus, and Interfaith Works were the three lowest scoring. So rather than trying to give everyone a little bit of money, there was kind of desire on the technical team and the funding work group kind of accepted those recommendations to try to fund those higher scoring applications. So yeah, Michael.
For the scattered site program, so is that, you use the word expand, that's to expand scattered site beyond what currently exists, or is that to keep it going when it sunsets in doesn't it sunset in like a month or two?
It does. And so this was something kind of one of the challenges with the application. It was a little unclear. And so I think it would primarily be to kind of evolve and really focus. OLIMAP is working with some faith-based communities, and they're having some, to support faith-based communities who are hosting perhaps tiny home villages or other folks on their property. So it would not be necessarily a continuation of kind of their existing scattered site program that's funded through the county, but more kind of helping them change in a new direction to primarily support these kind of faith-based communities. Maybe not expanding their capacity, but perhaps helping them redirect that program in a new direction.
Okay, thanks.
Can I ask one?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm just curious about Safe Places operations and maintenance. That's quite a bit lower even than they received last year. Is this an episodic one-time CHG and then there's going to be more? Can you remind me of that?
Yeah, this is kind of a one-time infusion. So we received $700,000 last year that we awarded. And so just to be clear, Safe Place is receiving that $95,000, and so that $95,000 has been renewed. They'll receive that, so the $39,000 is on top of that. So their new award will really be, what's that? $130,000.
Okay, yeah, I was having trouble combining them in my head, so thank you.
So really for kind of the Safe Place and the Ponza, their new award is really a combination of those two columns, the 21 funding amount plus this new 22 funding request.
Okay.
Will be their 22 award.
That's super helpful, Tom. Thank you. You probably said that and I just missed it.
Thanks
And then
for clarifying that.
I'm just a little bit curious about what prevention is for $100,000, but I know that a lot of other smarter people talked about it to get here too, though. So
yeah, can someone, Darian, can you help me out with that?
Yeah, Trish made a comment actually, and she wrote in the Q&A section explaining it if someone wants to read it or if you want to refer there.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. I don't know. Can you read
I can read it if you'd like. Trish wrote, if you feel it is appropriate, I would be happy to briefly describe the CHG Targeted Prevention Program. Short version is that it provides rental assistance to families who are imminent at risk of homelessness and have no predictors or characteristics that suggest that without assistance, they will become literally homeless. It is families who cannot be served by other housing programs because they are not literally homeless. Trish.
okay, that's the level I needed. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Trish.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Trish. Okay. Anybody else have a question or a comment about the recommendations here? Are we ready for a motion?
Should I go ahead, Carolyn?
Pardon?
Can I go ahead and make one?
Please, yeah.
Okay. So I move that we approve the recommendations for cold and hazardous weather and other services, as well as the consolidated homeless grant funds as presented.
I'll
Oh,
second.
this is Michael. Never mind. I'll third, I guess.
It's very, very seconded. Any discussion? I want to thank the technical team and the funding group for their hard work on this. I've done that work for a lot of years now, and I know how tough it is. There's heart-wrenching decisions that have to be made, and somebody had to make them. So thank you all so much, and especially thank you, Tom, because couldn't do this without you. So
Thank you. No, really appreciate that. This was a lot happening in the last kind of 2 weeks. So really appreciate especially the funding work group and the work they put in and the technical team.
yeah, okay. Any other comments or discussion?
I think we still need to vote.
Yes,
There was a motion in it.
I know. That's why I just want to see if anybody else had any discussion on the motion. Okay, all in favor of approval, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we got us a list.
Can I ask a question, Carolyn?
Please.
Tom, I'm just curious. I've been charged with looking under rocks to find $1 million a year to operate Stoll Road. And I know that we're looking at a hotel purchase that's going to cost a significant amount of money too. I'm just wondering what's on your radar as we spend money that we have on other things to be able to operate these projects that we've been working on together.
What's on my radar is we need to turn over a lot of rocks because one of the things that is going to really impact our system is, so for the past 18 months, we've had ESGCV money, Emergency Solutions Grant COVID money, which brought in close to $3.8 million that we use to supplement our homeless crisis response system. And so that really funded Interfaith Works to move from an overnight to a 24/7 operations. They've indicated they're not willing to go back to just overnight, especially with Unity Commons. It has supported Family Support Center, be able to go from volunteers to kind of staffing, increase hotels. It's really increased our funding for outreach. That money will be, for the most part, done some point this summer, depending on the program. That money is coming to an end. And that will be a new gap kind of in our system that we will need to fund or try to figure out. We are hopeful that we'll be receiving some 1277 funds. I think that will be fairly modest kind of in this first year. Some of that will be dedicated to rent assistance. Some of it has already gone to rapid rehousing and hoteling programs. So I think the flexible money under 1277 will be fairly limited this year. Hopefully beginning in 2023, that will be kind of more robust with some more flexibility. But still, I think there's going to be a lot of demands on that money. So I think as we look at and start discussions around the countywide home fund and whether a portion of that can be used for services and what ARPA is paying for, especially as you mentioned, kind of 2 possible new projects and how those operating costs. I think one of the things we're also, as we think about those projects, will be really important is positioning those projects to be competitive for state funding under whether rapid acquisition dollars from the state or also the right-of-way funding that's available in the state that can pay for operations for programs that are moving people off of right-of-ways into kind of shelter or more permanent housing options. And so it will be important for us as we think about those projects to make sure they are well positioned to be competitive to access those funds, because we will need those funds to be able to support those types of projects.
Okay, that's really helpful. And then just sort of as a follow-up, do you put any extension of the scattered site program in that same bucket, or is there another plan for that?
The scattered site program, I think, as we kind of talked about a couple meetings ago, is kind of on the table for this kind of body to kind of figure out. Kind of right now, we do not have additional funding to continue scattered site. That funding, as kind of Michael indicated, that contract is expiring July 1st. We might be able to kind of push funding out for a couple more weeks, but essentially that project is coming to an end. The 2163 fund balance, as document recording fee collections have decreased in the last several months and are projected to decrease probably even further as interest rates increase. There is not capacity in kind of our fund balance to kind of to add that, to fund that kind of further. So I think, yes, the future of the scattered site is very much kind of up for discussion and up for kind of decision making on if and how that moves forward.
Yeah, I think, we have some big hills in front of us, but some new money. So I think, hopefully we can get to those soon. Is the fund balance in all of the funds well known? Is that something that we've scrubbed recently?
It's constantly a changing target because we kind of fund. We made funding decisions last year to fund projects kind of this year, so we're a little bit behind, right? And so the funds we're collecting currently are paying for our current contracts. So we collected more last year than we awarded in contracts, and this year we're probably have more in contracts than we're actually going to collect. So it's always a little bit of a tough to kind of really pin down exactly where the fund balance is, because we've spent it before we collect it.
Okay.
But yeah, so we can look at those numbers and provide an update to this group kind of in the coming months of kind of where we look like we're at with our fund balances.
Thank you, Tom. And I appreciate you letting me grill you, but I think it's just important that we understand, that $2 or $3 million in operating funds for, the things just that we've already talked about. And that's without going into anything new or different. So that, if by my calculation, that's maybe more than half of the home fund if we had nothing else. And I think there are other opportunities coming from the state, but we still have a lot of work to do. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
All righty. We ready to move on to the RHC and HAT retreat update? If so, Darian, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, no problem. The first part of the retreat was last week on Friday. It seemed to go really well. I was so exhausted, being in a room with 20 people for 8 hours hasn't happened yet, but I think overall it was super successful. A lot of the people in this meeting were there, so feel free to jump in if I miss anything, but we focused primarily on the foundation of the RHC, a potential refresh and collaboration with the HAT, and incorporating the home fund and additional funding streams, and what we want the future of the HAT to look like, what we want performance measures, our vision to be. All the attendees took a really hard look at current data in the county, which it felt pretty eye-opening to me, at least, and allowed us to really reframe the movement of the RHC. And yeah, a lot of foundation building. So the second part is this Friday at the City Hall, Olympia City Hall Council Chambers. Council members, fingers crossed that the sound works. So hope we're going to be testing that tomorrow to make sure. But yes, take 2 at Olympia City Hall on Friday. Really going to do more processes, procedures, and start putting in the building blocks to what the future of the RHC looks like. So anyone else have anything to add?
Just in preparation for day 2, Megan sent out email today with a survey link. Please don't forget to complete that survey link. It's just really 2 questions and a little, 3 questions, but they're very short and simple. So, that will help set up the stage for Friday.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on day 1 of the retreat or what lies ahead? Okay. Well, I'm going to try to attend remotely. I hear that's a bit of a challenge, but
Jacinda has a hand up.
oh, okay, Jacinda.
Sorry, everyone. Apologies if Darian already commented, but just wanted to pass on the affordable housing team subgroup of the HAT met on Tuesday of this week. And there was definitely a sentiment that was passed on that they didn't feel that brick and mortar developers were adequately represented or included at the table. So just wanted to pass that on. And Darian and I did communicate that if they had kind of specific comments that they wanted us to share that. Just a minute, to share that with us before Friday so we could share that with all of you.
Okay. All righty. Anything else on the retreat? Okay, go to the order. Who's got some good?
Well, I have a good of the order, but great. So today, these members of our homeless outreach team met with the Department of Transportation. And so this is just to put on folks' radar that DOT is moving forward with clearing some of the areas that were required by the governor's office, and this is coming down the pike pretty rapidly, and so we're just hoping to put it on all of your agendas. There's 5 locations that DOT is putting their attention on. I'm just going to share them. It's City Center, Wheeler, Lilly, Slater Kenny, and Pacific Avenue. We estimate there to be about 80 residents residing in these encampments. And so the clearing of these areas are coming very soon. So we are prepping for that. They met this morning. I wasn't on the meeting, but I was shared with this by our homeless outreach team, and their response is that Commerce is taking the lead on housing the residents in the encampments, and we don't know what that means. We're suspecting financially Commerce will be, providing funds to help the residents in the encampments, but what the partnership looked like, what the contracting looked like, what the payment means, we don't know. All we know is that DOT is moving pretty full steam ahead to clear these areas. And so it'll be impactful regional wide. Yeah, we're doing our best to prepare. So I just want to put on everyone's radar.
We got contacted this morning too about this, and we're still going to be looking at getting more information and hopefully have as much advance notice of when they are on the ground moving forward. They are pulling in resources. They're also coordinated with State Patrol and as Darian said, Commerce. But we're going to try to continue to see what more information we can get and be as prepared as possible.
Darian, could you list the sites again? I
Yeah, no
missed
problem.
one.
City Center, Wheeler, Lilly, Slater Kenny, and Pacific Avenue. And currently the city of Olympia has a contract with DOT for Wheeler. And that's in our plan to continue to work with residents and clear the site, but not at the pace that DOT is looking for at this time. And so we're really unsure with how that relationship is going to transpire, but it's on their list. We have a contract in place and had some long-term goals, but I don't know if that's going to be seen or honored with their schedule.
They did say that the Lacey agreement would be maintained and honored. So,
okay.
Councilmember Madrone has her hand up.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like from a communication standpoint, what kind of messaging is going to go out to the community around this? It's, it sounds like there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of it not in our control, but, Darian, I assume that Jay Burney is aware and that our communications shop is thinking about what we might say. And I'm just curious if that conversation has been had among the jurisdictions to make sure we're all saying the same thing,
Yeah, we found out a lot of this at 11 a.m. this morning, so it is in its infancy. But yes, I'm hoping that we can come here to be on the same page and know that this is being kind of, move forward pretty steadily it's a directive, like Rick said it pretty clearly earlier, that this isn't a policy change, this is a directive from the governor's office. So we are doing our best to respond, and we don't have clear talking points yet, but I'm hoping that here we can really formulate those and ensure that we're really, as a region, on the same page about what we're going to do to support folks. Yeah.
And you mentioned, you keep saying like it's moving along rapidly. Is there a known timeline yet, or is that one of the unknowns?
That's the biggest unknown, I'd say. Rick asked pointedly and asked like for a timeline and for prep, and didn't get anything, and we didn't hear it either. So.
We when in the conversations we had, they didn't know because they're pulling resources and mobilizing to do this, but we did request to give us as much advance notice as possible. And there'll be some type of notice, I'm sure, but it just how long a lead time we'll have, we don't know yet.
Does the state believe that Boise v. Martin applies to it or not? Or are they saying it's too dangerous because it's in the right of way?
We didn't have those type of conversations with our contact with the state about the authority or what they look at in terms of Boise Martin. I think that's something they're probably coordinating on their end.
Okay. I mean, I'd be looking at this point for a mayor or a chair of a county commission to reach out to the governor's office and find out what happened and why we weren't briefed on this before it happened. That's pretty significant. I mean, although my first reaction is if there's one thing that will bring us all together, it's that kind of thing happening to us from the outside with zero control.
Jeremy, you want to touch base later?
Yeah.
All righty. Anything else for good of the order? Okay, if not, our next meeting is coming up on May 25th at 4 o'clock. And we will see you then, if not sooner. So if I could have a motion to adjourn, we're out of here.
So moved.
All right, we're done. Thank you, everybody. It's good to see you, at least across the miles from Florida here.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time. Thanks.